Welcome back to Face the State on this Sunday morning, our first show of 2020. Mayor Luke Bronin is beginning his second term in office, and there is some optimism about the future of the capital city. And Mayor Bronin is with us here now. First of all, congrats on re-election.
Thanks, Dennis, and Happy New Year.
And your next Happy New Year to you as well, and your upcoming term. So let's talk about your goals for the next 4 years. What would you like to see accomplished?
Look, I mean, my goal for the next 4 years is the same as for the last 4, which is to build a capital city that is strong and vibrant. That's the growing heart of the region, and is also a place where everybody in the city has a share in Hartford's rise. And we've worked hard over the last 4 years to get the city through a historic fiscal crisis, to build what I've called a fragile stability that we need to protect, and at the same time to get some investment and growth happening for the first time in a long time. And now we need to keep that work going.
Just a couple weeks ago in an interview with Mike Savino, you called it a fragile recovery.
Yeah.
Describe the fragility of that to us, because, I mean, could it just collapse at any moment?
I think the way I'd say it is, when I came in, we were off the cliff. I've used this analogy with you before, but we were like the cartoon character that was over the cliff, legs still running, and hadn't looked down yet. And so we had to look down, and then we had to get back onto solid ground. But the reality is that even with all the hard work we've done, so we've made deep cuts that have had a profound effect. We partnered in huge ways with our labor unions. We partnered with the state in big ways. That allowed us to get to a place of stability and to lay out a longer-term plan. But the deeper structural issues are still there. You still have a city that's small with enormous need, and half of the property non-taxable. You know, a city that's got twice the population, but just about half of the taxable property that, you know, our neighbor West Hartford does, or about the same amount of taxable property as small communities like a Glastonbury or Farmington have. So you have still that deep structural problem. But we're going to be working hard to preserve and protect the stability that we've achieved, and at the same time to continue the growth, because for the first time in a long, long time, you're starting to see investment come back in. You're seeing private investment come in to the city, and we need to make sure that we continue that.
So how do you, attract more businesses, more corporations, so you can beef up the grant list?
Well, we're doing that. Of course, Infosys made Hartford an innovation center. Another company recently called Galaxy Solutions, which works closely with Cigna, they decided to make Hartford an innovation center as well. Companies like Stanley Black & Decker have made Hartford the center of their innovation efforts. You've got insurance companies partnering together to attract startups from around the world, and the same thing happening on the advanced manufacturing and the digital healthcare side. So we're trying to use those partnerships with our existing employers to attract others, and that's working. But we need to continue to show the momentum, and that's why we've also focused hard on making sure that we're working on residential development throughout our neighborhoods and in the downtown, and that all has to continue. We've got some big projects like the downtown north around the baseball park, Park in Maine, which I think, both of which I think are likely to get shovels in the ground in the first part of this year, and then a lot more that we're working on.
As you look at cities around the country, there seems to be a trend with companies coming back to downtown areas, because in the 70s and 80s, they moved to these suburban office parks for the parking, but millennials don't want to live in these places. Now the building's getting kind of dated. Is there a way to look around, perhaps Metro Hartford, and say, you might be better off downtown?
Well, that's already happened too. Companies like United Bank, now People's, consolidated into the downtown. Connecticut Children's consolidated a lot of their operations into the downtown. I think there are a number of other companies that may be interested in doing the same. But what you're describing, it's not a new trend. The problem is Connecticut was late to recognize it. It's been about 20 years that economic growth has shifted back to cities. And I believe deeply that one of the reasons Connecticut has not grown over the last decade is because we were late to that shift. We still were banking on our suburban office park model or bedroom community model, and that has its strengths. But if you don't have cities that are vibrant and strong and able to retain your talent and attract new talent, then you're not going to be a center of growth. That's why I think the work we're doing in Hartford isn't important just for Hartford. It's important for the whole state of Connecticut. If we don't have cities that are strong, we will not grow.
Do you think that Connecticut is, well, in Hartford in particular, is missing out on this construction boom that's going on right now? You go through downtown Boston, you go through New York, there are cranes everywhere. They are filling in every spingle, vacant lot with a high rise.
Yeah, there's been an enormous divergence in America. There are are communities, there are cities that are growing like crazy, and there are those that have been stuck. But I'd also say this: I think there are really two kinds of cities in the country right now. There are those cities that have caught that growth wave, but are seeing enormous changes, some of which are not as welcome and unintended consequences. You're seeing communities displaced. You're seeing people priced out. You're seeing dramatic changes in the nature of those communities. And then you have cities all across the country that don't really know what else to do other than to aspire to be that first kind of city. We're trying to do something different. We're trying to get economic growth, attract companies in, grow jobs, but also make sure that that growth is inclusive, that we're attracting development throughout our city, to our neighborhoods too, and that this is a place where everybody shares in our rise. That's the mission that we've set for ourselves. It's not an easy one, and we're going to be working hard every single day to try to achieve it.
One of the big decisions you're going to have to make soon is the hiring of a police chief. Where does that stand right now, and what kind of chief are you looking for?
Well, to me, I think the characteristics of a chief are that, number one, they've got to be really committed to community policing and understand what that means. And to me, that means that community policing isn't just a subspecialty inside the police department. It's the ethos of the police department. It's a department that recognizes that its effectiveness and its authority comes from the trust that it has with the community. So that's one. And two, I want to make sure that it's a police officer, a chief who is a strong administrator, who is running the department well, who's holding the department accountable to the high standards that it should have. And I think we've got a police department that does some of the toughest work anywhere that you can find. And I think that the vast majority of those officers are doing it because they believe in public service, they believe in the work that they're doing, and I want a chief who is partnering with the community, who is leading and inspiring the men and women of the department, and is also willing to hold them accountable.
You know, there are some officers who have told me that they believe the department seems to lack focus in recent months since the departure of Chief Rosado. Do you agree with that?
I actually don't really agree with that. I think that interim chief has done a very good job, but there's anytime you're interim, it's more difficult to put your stamp on a place, right? So in the coming weeks and months, we'll work on that process.
Let's talk a little bit about the Etna Viaduct, the I-84 project, which we've been talked about for years. The governor recently said that he just favors kind of rebuilding it the way it is. Do you support that?
I don't. I think that there have been two huge planning mistakes over the last century in the capital region. One was cutting off the capital city from the Connecticut River by building I-91 right along the river. And the second was putting 84 straight through the center of the city and cutting it in half north and south. I would love to see that viaduct lowered, brought below grade, so you can knit those neighborhoods back together. The one thing I think we've got an opportunity to do now that the state has stepped back and said we're going to take a bigger picture is to look at that broader regional opportunity to reconnect our capital to the river, to get rid of the interchange that's right in the heart of downtown, maybe get rid of the mix master that eats up so much of East Hartford. There's real opportunity if we do this planning exercise in the right way with a serious focus on what's going to drive growth and correct those big mistakes of the past.
Talking about development, a little pet peeve that some people have brought up to me, and I have noticed this because we've done the story, why are the parking spots downtown, particularly around the park, smaller than you find in West Hartford Center? There are people who won't come downtown because of it. They can't fit their car there.
I don't know about that.
No, they are. They're smaller.
Yeah, I drive a pretty big car. I haven't had trouble fitting into them. Well,
is it a mistake by DPW that they would be smaller than you'd find in other towns?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you always want to try to strike that balance between providing the right number of spaces and then providing extra space. I'm happy to look into that for you.
There's a contractor for one of the state agencies says he cannot park on Elm Street. He cannot fit his cut. His Chevy Tahoe.
I live on Elm Street. I've never had that trouble.
Okay.
But I don't know. I'm happy to work on him. Help him with his parallel parking.
Sounds good. All right, Mayor Bronin, thanks and congratulations again. In a moment, we remember that two-time Connecticut legends. That time that two Connecticut legends chatted it up right here on Channel 3. Denise DeCenzo and Paul Newman. We'll be right back, but we welcome your comments on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.